Now it's time to explore a superpower. Now, if I had a superpower, it would definitely be whatever they had in Wakanda with the vibranium, because that brought out the best in them, in the people, the super tech African empowered society. That's your girl, Chinenye Joinena Ogumike, that's my name. But sorry, I digress. But now also, as it turns out, purpose is a superpower too. And businesses are embracing it more and more as consumers are demanding it. So let's hear from We Are All Humans, Claudia Romo Edelman, on why she sees purpose as a company's ultimate superpower.
In 2015, the United Nations created a plan to achieve a more equitable future for all. The 17 Sustainable Development Goals provide a framework on how to end the extreme poverty, fight inequalities, and protect the planet. I have worked for a number of organizations like the United Nations, UNICEF, the UN Refugee Agency, always trying to bring issues to the table so that we can win the hearts and the minds of the people at the forefront of technological innovation and different channels for various organizations to get more people involved. And all that work inspired me to create my last venture, the We Are All Human Foundation, focused on spreading the positive narrative of diversity, inclusion, and equity, to remind everyone that we belong to the same human family. And that is important because despite the incredible progress that we're making as a society, divisive language is getting bigger, and the sense of the otherness is increasing. And that is an issue. Diversity and inclusion will be the main flag of the Sustainable Development Goals. The way that sustainability and purpose were 20 years ago, inclusion will be important. People will care about tolerance and places where they can be themselves and accepted. And diversity and inclusion will be inclusive and everywhere. And that's why the World Human Foundation aims to remind people that we belong to the same human family. Because as a whole, the world is making progress. There is no better time to be born than today. If you would be a girl flying in the sky, trying to decide where to land in the caves, middle age, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, the better time to be born is today. There's no better time for women to have access to education, to electricity, to light, to the access to vote, to vaccination. And nevertheless, the Sustainable Development Goals launched 5 years ago have yet to do a lot of progress. But it is important that we get to know them. We get to know the global goals, but we also get to understand how important it is that we achieve them and that we are in a decade of action, because there's no plan B, but there's no planet B either. So where are we 5 years on the progress of the Sustainable Development Goals? Well, this year was a hard year, and we received a hard blow. But exactly because of COVID and everything that we have seen in the planet, it is a reminder that the Sustainable Development Goals are really a relevant framework, because we cannot face those challenges alone, and we cannot face them without a plan. For example, in health, there have been impressive gains made in recent years of declining infant and maternal mortality rates. We have been able to turn the tide on HIV and AIDS, and we've halved the malaria death. Until the end of 2019, advances in many areas of health continued, but the rate of progress was not sufficient to really hit the targets of the goal of health, which is goal number 3. But those are threatened not only because of COVID-19, but the breaks in vaccination campaigns. Vaccination will be a big fight for the future. Talk about nourishment and food. The number of unnourished people has dropped by almost half in the past 2 decades. Central and East Asia, Latin America, the Caribbean have all made huge progress. Along with conflict, climate shocks, and the crises that provoked by poverty, COVID-19 poses an additional threat to food systems, indirectly reducing purchasing power and the capacity to produce and also distribute food, which affects the most vulnerable people. In 2020, up to 132 million more people may suffer from undernourishment because of COVID-19. Rapid economic progress in India and China lifted a number of people out of poverty, but as of 2015, about 740 million people still lived in less than $1.90 a day. The share of the world's population living in extreme poverty declined from 15% to 10% in 2015. However, the pace of global poverty reduction has not grown as fast, even before COVID. Nowcast estimates putting global poverty rate in 2019 at 8%. Now, Oxfam estimates that the crisis could push 500,000 Black people into poverty. That is something that we have to tackle. And let's talk about before the corona crisis, projections show that more than 200 million children would be out of school, and only 60% of young people would be completing upper secondary education in 2030. Education systems worldwide have been hit hard and abruptly by the pandemic. The pandemic has re-emphasized the digital divide and the right to internet access, particularly for those in rural areas. When it comes to gender equality, child marriage and female genital mutilation have declined in recent years, and women's representation in the political arena is higher than ever before. But the promise of a world in which every woman and girl enjoys full gender equality, where all legal, social, and economic barriers to their employment have been removed, is far from achieved. In fact, the global goal is even more distant than before, since women and girls are being hit hard by COVID. Hard. The crisis is creating circumstances that have already contributed to a surge in reports in violence against women and girls, more domestic violence due to COVID, and may increase child marriage and female genital mutilation. Moreover, women are more likely to take on most additional care work of owning the closure of schools and the day centers. They are also on the front lines in fighting the coronavirus, since women account for almost 70% of health and social workers globally. As someone said, if there would be a panic button for women, we would be pushing it now. But that's why it is a perfect time for a plan, because there's a huge demand. We need a framework, but also there's a huge market of purpose. People care. Young people care. They want to work in organizations that have a heart, that understand purpose. People are buying with their beliefs and buying with their heart. 66% of millennials all across the world. But not only that, it's what used to be millennials, now it's intergenerational. So more people are caring about sustainability, purpose, diversity, and inclusion. And that makes companies that are sustainable, that care about the SDGs, that care about purpose, by far more valuable. According to a study of Kantar Consulting, brands that are purpose-led grow 170% faster than brands that don't. They grow only 70%. That is crazy. Most consumers don't want to work with companies that remain silent on issues that they care about. That is more than 60% of everywhere in America. And socially responsible companies have a major leg up in hiring, because people want to work for organizations that they care. If you are making a choice, make sure that you understand if the organizations that you're working for have a heart. SAP has been in the forefront of actually pushing the SDG agenda, creating environments for young people to understand them, bringing them on front, opening up opportunities for leaders to connect at different levels. Diversity, inclusion, and purpose are not only the good thing to do, but the smart thing to do. But it's not so much about diversity as much as it's inclusion. As I said, the world is browner, more feminine, and with a bigger heart before. We have to make sure that we can belong, that we feel that we can be ourselves. And that is why we want to use the amazing framework of the Sustainable Development Goals to translate them into a plan for the community that I work most with, the US Hispanic community in America. As part of our Hispanic Leadership Summit just coming up in December, what we're going to do is take the agenda of the Hispanic community to be matching it and seeing where we are along with in the Sustainable Development Goals. If Hispanics would be a standalone economy, we would be the eighth largest economy in the world, the eighth largest country in the world. So it's important to know where we are. And it's important for the SDGs to have minority groups like the Hispanic community move forward. And so the question is, how do the SDGs advance with Hispanics? How do the SDGs help Hispanics advance? And how can Hispanics advance the SDGs? The time to act is now. The time to be inclusive is today. The time to be acting and doing something for the community is now. Diversity and inclusion will be at the forefront of advancing the Sustainable Development Goals, making sure that no one is left behind. More now than ever, purpose is the future, and it's important that we communicate and we associate and we engage with that. This is the time to act. The time for us is today. Let's actually understand and get engaged and do your part with the Sustainable Development Goals. And whatever you can do, let's not forget that we are all human.